The lock jammed. Masha turned the key once more, then again, her frustration growing with each attempt. Inside the apartment, her apartment, voices urgently whispered. One belonged to Nikolai, her husband supposedly bedridden with illness. The other a female voice Masha had never heard before. "Nikolai?" She knocked on the door, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Who's in there with you?" The sudden silence that followed was more revealing than any answer. 15 years of marriage, thousands of nights coming home after long days at work, sacrificing her career to care for her sick husband. All of it condensed into this singular moment. Masha on the outside, a stranger on the inside, and between them a locked door that refused to open. That's when she noticed a red silk scarf caught beneath the door, an item that didn't belong to her. Some betrayals come in the form of whispers, others, like this one, in the form of silence. Before we begin this emotional story, please comment below which city you're watching from. It will be my pleasure to give your comment a little heart. Now let's begin this moving story. The fluorescent lights of the Petrov publishing house buzzed, faintly above Masha's desk, as her fingers flew across the keyboard. At 42, she had become the company's most reliable editor, the one who stayed late when deadlines loomed, who polished rough manuscripts into gleaming final drafts. Her colleagues often joked that the building's foundation included Masha's dedication, set like concrete beneath the floors. "Masha, these quarterly reports won't finish themselves," she whispered to herself, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. The office had emptied hours ago, but she barely noticed. This was her rhythm, her dance with responsibility. Since Nikolai had fallen ill 6 months ago, work had become both her escape and her anchor. The steady tide of manuscripts kept her, mind from drowning in worry. She glanced at the small silver frame on her desk, Nikolai on their 10th anniversary trip to Lake Baikal, his arm around her shoulders, his smile still robust before the illness had hollowed his cheeks. In the photo, his eyes held that mischievous glint that first attracted her 20 years ago at university. "The trouble with you, Mashenka," he told her on their third date, "is that you care too much about everything." He'd meant it as a compliment, she knew, but sometimes she wondered if caring too much was precisely her problem. Nikolai's illness had come suddenly, pneumonia that should have cleared, but instead settled deeper in his lungs, revealing an underlying condition that required ongoing treatment. The doctors were hopeful but cautious. Masha had arranged her schedule meticulously, ensuring someone was always with him when she couldn't be. His mother in the mornings, a nurse in the afternoons, and Masha rushing home every evening, transforming. From editor to caretaker with practiced efficiency, Ms. Petrova. The security guard, Dmitri, appeared at her office door, his weathered face creased with concern. "It's nearly 9. Your husband is waiting, yes." Masha nodded, quickly saving her work. "Just finishing this section, Dmitri, thank you. You work too hard," he said. The same gentle admonishment he'd given her for years. As she gathered her things, her phone vibrated against the desk. The screen showed Nikolai's mother's number, and a cold thread of anxiety wound through Masha's chest. Yelena never called this late unless... Yelena, is everything... Mashenka. The older woman's voice sounded strange, tight. "Nikolai asked for you. His fever is back and he's not himself. The medicine perhaps, but he keeps saying he needs to tell you something important." Masha's hand tightened around her phone. "I'm leaving now. Did you call Dr. Sokolov?" "Yes, but he says not to worry yet. Still, Kolya is very insistent about speaking with you." Masha had never left work early before, not once in 15 years. But as she ended the call, she didn't hesitate. What meeting, what deadline could possibly matter if Nikolai needed her? As she rushed from her office, leaving half-finished reports scattered across her desk for the first time in her career, a single question pulsed through her mind. What was so urgent that her stoic husband, who hated being a burden even when seriously ill, would send for her like this? Absolutely not. Anton Mikhailov's voice filled the conference room, his imposing figure blocking Masha's path to the door. "The Baranov contract needs these revisions tonight, Masha. You know what's at stake." The quarterly meeting had gathered the senior editors, with their director's presence making it clear how crucial this particular project was to the publishing house. Masha had never seen Anton so rigid, his normally jovial face now set in stern lines. "My husband," Masha began, clutching her phone, "has been sick for months," Anton finished for her. "And the company has been more than accommodating. But this meeting was scheduled weeks ago. The Tokyo partners are waiting for our approval." Masha felt the weight of 7 pairs of eyes upon her. 15 years of perfect attendance, of putting the company first, of earning the reputation as their most reliable editor. All of it crystallized into this moment of choice. "I'm sorry, Anton." Her voice came out softer than intended, but steady. "This is the first time he's asked for me specifically. Something's wrong." Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her notes. "Svetlana can handle the final review. She's been working alongside me on this project from the beginning." The younger editor looked up, surprise and anxiety flashing across her face. I can try, Masha, but you can do it," Masha said firmly, passing her the folder with her meticulous notes. Then, turning back to Anton, she added, "I've never asked for special treatment before." A heavy silence filled the room. Anton's expression shifted between disbelief and calculation. Finally, he stepped aside. "This will be reflected in your performance review," he said quietly. Masha nodded, accepting the consequence. "I understand." The walk through the office felt surreal, as if she were moving through someone else's life. The careful compartmentalization she had maintained for months, work separate from home, professional concerns walled off from personal worries, crumbled with each step. Colleagues stared as she rushed past, her usually measured pace replaced by something closer to flight. Outside, the September evening had already darkened the city. Masha bypassed the queue for taxis, breaking into an uncharacteristic run toward the metro station. Each minute felt precious, weighted with Nikolai's urgent request. What could he possibly need to tell her that couldn't wait until her normal return time? The possibilities multiplied in her mind, each more concerning than the last. Had the doctor shared some grave prognosis that Nikolai had been keeping from her? Was there a decision about treatment that he couldn't make alone? As the metro train lurched forward, Masha found herself dwelling on their last conversation that morning. Had there been signs she missed? He had seemed tired but calm, kissing her goodbye with the same tender smile he always wore. "Don't worry so much, Mashenka," he'd said, the familiar refrain of their marriage. But there had been something in his eyes, a fleeting shadow she had attributed to his medication. The train screeched to a halt at her stop, and Masha pushed through the crowd, her heart racing. The normally 20-minute walk from the station to their apartment would take too long. She flagged down a passing taxi, offering extra to hurry. As the car navigated the evening traffic, Masha stared out at the city lights blurring past, a growing sense of foreboding settling over her. Something waited for her at home, something that would change everything. She could feel it with a certainty that made her breath catch in her throat. What would she find when she finally reached their door? The taxi crawled through Moscow's congested streets, each red light an agony of impatience for Masha. Through the window, she watched couples strolling together, friends laughing outside cafes. Ordinary scenes from an ordinary evening that now seemed to belong to another universe entirely. How quickly security could dissolve, she thought, like fog burned away by sudden sun. "Can you take that side street?" she asked the driver, pointing to a narrow alley she knew would bypass the worst of the traffic. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, tighter, higher than normal. The driver grunted but complied, swinging the taxi into the shortcut. As they bumped over cobblestones, Masha closed her eyes, memories washing over her with unexpected force. Nikolai, 10 years younger, carrying her across the threshold of their new apartment, both of them laughing as he pretended to stumble under her weight. "Home," he had declared, setting her down in the empty living room. "Our fortress." They had spent that first night on a mattress on the floor, planning where each piece of furniture would go, dreaming aloud in the darkness. Nikolai teaching her to dance in their kitchen, his hand warm against the small of her, back guiding her through steps her body couldn't seem to learn. "You're thinking too much," he'd laughed. "Feel the music, Mashenka." She never did master the waltz, but the memory of his patient instruction remained perfect. Nikolai on the balcony the morning after his diagnosis, a cup of tea growing cold in his hands as he stared out at the city. She had stood in the doorway, watching him, afraid to intrude on his private reckoning with mortality. When he finally noticed her, he had smiled, a smile so brave and gentle that she had nearly broken apart at the sight of it. "It's still a beautiful day," he'd said simply, making room for her beside him. The taxi swerved suddenly, jolting Masha back to the present. They were turning onto her street now, the familiar row of pre-war buildings coming into view. Her apartment, building stood in the middle of the block, its Art Nouveau facade weathered but elegant, windows glowing with the lives contained within. As they pulled up, Masha thrust money at the driver and scrambled out, not waiting for change. The crisp evening air filled her lungs as she hurried toward the entrance, her eyes automatically scanning the street, a habit formed from years of returning home after dark. It was then that she noticed it, a sleek black car parked directly in front of their building, a model too expensive for their modest neighborhood. The vehicle sat like an anomaly, gleaming and out of place among the older, more practical cars that usually lined the street. Masha slowed her pace, a new uneasiness joining her worry. Dr. Sokolov drove a sensible Volkswagen. Yelena didn't drive. At all. The nurse used public transportation. None of their friends owned such a car, so whose was it? And why was it parked precisely in front of their building, in the spot where she usually found a taxi waiting, if Nikolai needed to be taken to the hospital? As Masha approached the building's entrance, she noticed something else. A cigarette, butt on the ground, freshly extinguished, the kind with a gold filter that Nikolai used to smoke before his illness made it impossible. But Nikolai hadn't smoked in months. The nurse wouldn't smoke on duty. Yelena had never touched cigarettes in her life. Masha's steps faltered as she reached for the door handle. A strange certainty washed over her. Whatever waited upstairs, it was not what she had been preparing herself for during the frantic journey. Home, the mystery car, the cigarette, the urgent call, these pieces refused to form a coherent picture. She entered the building and started up the stairs, her usual fatigue after a long day forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. With each step, the question expanded in her mind. What would she find when she reached the 5th floor? Whose car sat waiting below? And why did she suddenly feel like she was walking into something unknown, despite heading to the home she had shared with Nikolai for 15 years? Masha paused on the landing of the 5th floor, her breath coming in short bursts after the climb. The familiar hallway stretched before her, the scuffed wooden floors and faded wallpaper unchanged from when she had left that morning. 4 doors lined the corridor, the Ivanovs to the left, old Mrs. Sorokina across from them, the currently vacant apartment at the end, and their own door, second on the right. She had expected to hear something, perhaps the murmur of the television, that Nikolai kept on for company, or Yelena's voice speaking soothingly to her son. But the hallway was unnaturally quiet. Even the usual sounds from the Ivanovs' apartment, their radio usually tuned to classical music this time of evening, were absent. Approaching her door, Masha reached automatically for her keys. The worn brass key to their apartment sat heavily in her palm, familiar as her own heartbeat. She slid it into the lock with the practiced ease of someone who had performed this action thousands of times. The key went in, but when she tried to turn it, something was wrong. The mechanism wouldn't move. Frowning, she withdrew the key and tried again, more carefully this time. Again, the key entered but wouldn't turn. It was as if something were blocking it from the inside. "Nikolai?" she called, knocking lightly. "Yelena, it's me?" No answer came from within the apartment. Masha pressed her ear against the door. Was that movement she heard? The faint sound of footsteps moving hurriedly across their wooden floors. "Hello? Can someone open the door? My key isn't working." She knocked again, louder this time. The silence from within seemed deliberate now, tense rather than empty. Masha's heartbeat quickened as she tried once more with her key, wiggling it in the lock with increasing frustration. From behind the door came the unmistakable sound of whispering. 2 voices, too low to make out the words, but distinct enough to recognize that a conversation was taking place. One voice was deeper, possibly male. The other, softer voice was definitely female, but it wasn't the familiar timbre of Yelena's speech. "I can hear you in there," Masha called, her voice rising with a mixture of confusion and the first stirrings of alarm. "Please, open the door." More urgent whispering followed, then silence again. Masha's hand went to her phone, quickly dialing Nikolai's number. She heard it ring inside the apartment, once, twice, 3 times, before it was silenced abruptly, the call going to voicemail, without being answered. A cold weight settled in Masha's stomach. She tried Yelena's number next and heard no corresponding ring from inside the apartment. The call connected, but went straight to voicemail. "This is ridiculous," Masha muttered, her worry now transforming into indignation. She pounded on the door with her fist. "Nikolai, open this door immediately." The sudden silence from within was broken by a crash, something falling or being knocked over, followed by more hurried movement. Then, finally, a voice called out, "Just a minute." It was Nikolai's voice, but strained, oddly pitched, almost unrecognizable. Masha stepped back from the door, stunned. Nikolai was supposed to be bedridden with fever, barely able to speak according to Yelena's call. Yet here he was, apparently mobile enough to move around the apartment, strong enough to call out, and for some inexplicable reason, unwilling or unable to open the door for his wife. As she stood frozen in the hallway, the door to the Ivanovs' apartment opened slightly. Irina Ivanova, a woman in her 60s who had lived next door since before Masha and Nikolai moved in, peered out with undisguised curiosity. "Is everything all right, Masha Andreevna?" she asked, her eyes darting between Masha and the still closed door of the Petrova apartment. I'm not sure," Masha admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't get in. The lock seems to be blocked and no one will open the door." Irina's expression shifted, something like pity or perhaps discomfort passing across her lined face. "I see," she said carefully. "I thought, well, I assumed you knew." "Knew what?" Masha asked sharply. The older woman hesitated, then shook her head. "It's not my place. Perhaps you should keep knocking." Before Masha could press further, Irina retreated back into her apartment, closing the door with a definitive click. Alone again in the hallway, Masha felt a new sensation building inside her. Not just worry or confusion, but the first cold tendrils of fear. What did Irina assume she knew? Why would her neighbor look at her with such uncomfortable pity? She turned back to her door and was about to knock again when she noticed something protruding slightly from beneath it. A thin edge of silk fabric, vibrant red, caught in the narrow space between the door and the threshold. Masha knelt down, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the delicate material. It was a scarf, one she had never seen before, certainly not something that belonged among their possessions. From inside the apartment came a new sound, a woman's voice, no longer whispering but speaking in normal tones, though the words remained indistinct. It was definitely not Yelena's voice. It was younger, melodic, with the faintest hint of an accent Masha couldn't place. The pieces began to assemble themselves in Masha's mind, forming a picture she didn't want to see. The expensive car outside, the gold-filtered cigarette, the blocked lock, the strange woman's voice. Nikolai, supposedly fevered and weak, somehow on his feet and reluctant to open the door. What exactly was happening behind the door that had always represented safety and trust? Masha knelt before her own door, a position of supplication that made her throat tighten with humiliation. She leaned forward, pressing her eye to the keyhole, a trespasser seeking entry to what should have been her sanctuary. The narrow view revealed a slice of their apartment, the edge of the bookshelf Nikolai had built when they first moved in, a corner of the Persian rug her parents had given them as a wedding gift, and movement, shadowy figures passing back and forth just beyond. Her limited field of vision. She shifted position, trying to see more when the keyhole suddenly darkened. Someone was looking back at her. Masha jerked away from the door as if burned, heart hammering against her ribs. "Mashenka," Nikolai's voice came through the door, closer now. "Please, give me a few minutes." "Open this door," she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Open it now, Nikolai, or I'm calling the police." "Don't," he said quickly. "Please don't do that. I'll explain everything, but we need a moment to prepare." "We?" The word hung in the air between them, a small grenade of meaning. Masha rose to her feet, dignity reasserting itself. 20 years together, 15 of marriage, and now she stood locked out of her own home while her husband prepared with someone else inside. Each heartbeat felt like glass breaking inside her chest. "I'm going downstairs," she said coldly. "You have 5 minutes. After that, I'm coming back with the building superintendent and his master key." No response came from behind the door. Masha turned and walked toward the stairs, her movements mechanical. As she descended, her mind catalogued fragments of the past months, like puzzle pieces finally finding their places. Nikolai's insistence that she not rearrange her work schedule to care for him. His mother's increasing discomfort when Masha called for updates. The nurse. Masha had never actually met the nurse, had she? She had accepted Nikolai's assurance that his mother had arranged everything. On the third-floor landing, Masha encountered Mrs. Sorokina struggling up the stairs with her shopping, the old woman's face reddening with exertion. "Let me help you," Masha offered automatically, taking the heaviest bags. "Thank you, dear." Mrs. Sorokina studied Masha's face. "You look troubled. Is everything all right with Nikolai? I saw his visitor earlier. Quite a regular occurrence these days." Masha nearly dropped the bags. "His visitor?" The old woman nodded. "The young lady. Pretty thing, though perhaps a bit too made up for my taste. She's been coming around for, it must be several months now. Always when you're at work. I assumed she was the nurse." Each word landed like a physical blow. Masha managed to help. Mrs. Sorokina to her door before excusing herself, continuing downstairs in a daze. In the building's dingy lobby, she sank onto a bench, trying to order her thoughts. Around her, the familiar sounds of the building continued. The hum of the ancient elevator, the distant sound of a television, a child's laughter from an upper floor. How strange that the world continued normally while hers was shattering. She checked her watch. 4 minutes had passed. One more before she would find Pavel Kuznetsov, the super who lived in the basement apartment. One more minute of life as... She had known it. Her phone rang. Nikolai. She almost didn't answer, but some compulsion made her press the accept button. "I'm coming up," he said before she could speak. "Meet me halfway. 4th floor landing, please, Mashenka." The line went dead. Masha sat frozen, then slowly rose and began climbing the stairs again. Each step felt weighted, as if she were moving against a powerful current. When she reached the 4th floor, she found Nikolai waiting, leaning heavily against the wall. He looked terrible, thinner than even last night, his face pale and drawn, dark circles beneath his eyes. But he was dressed in a button-down shirt and pressed trousers, not the pajamas he'd been living in for weeks. His hair was combed neatly. He had shaved. "Who is she?" Masha asked simply. Nikolai closed his eyes briefly. "Her name is Anya. She's... How long?" 4 months. He wouldn't meet her gaze. "Since the diagnosis." 4 months. While Masha had been reorganizing her life around his care, working overtime to cover medical expenses, lying awake at night terrified of losing him, he had been... what? Finding comfort elsewhere, building a parallel life. "Is this some kind of crisis?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because of the illness? Some need to feel alive while facing mortality? Because if it is, it's not that simple." Nikolai's hands twisted together, knuckles white. "Masha, there's so much I haven't told you. About the illness, about everything." A strange calm descended over Masha. "Then tell me now." Nikolai finally looked directly at her, his eyes swimming with tears. "I've been lying to you for years. Not just months, years, and now..." He gestured vaguely toward their apartment above. "Now it's all come apart and I don't know how to fix it." "You can start by telling me what's in our apartment," Masha said. "What am I going to find when that door finally opens?" Nikolai's expression crumpled. "The life I've been hiding from you. Everything I couldn't bear to lose but was too cowardly to claim honestly." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Please, Masha, come upstairs. Let me introduce you to Anya properly. And then you'll understand why I couldn't tell you the truth about my condition." "What about your condition?" A new fear gripped Masha. "Nikolai, are you dying? Is that what this is about?" A strange smile touched his lips, bitter and sad at once. No, Mashenka, that's just it. I'm not dying at all. The door to apartment 5B opened without resistance this time. Masha stood on the threshold, Nikolai beside her, both hesitating at this final boundary between the life they had shared and whatever waited within. The familiar scent of their home reached her, the lemon polish Masha used on the furniture, the faint lingering aroma of morning coffee, but now mingled with something unfamiliar, a floral perfume, delicate but distinctive. "Please," Nikolai said softly, gesturing for Masha to enter first. She stepped inside, her eyes immediately drawn to the woman standing in the center of their living room. Tall and slender, with amber eyes and honey-colored hair pulled back in. A loose braid. She couldn't have been more than 30. She wore a simple blue dress that nonetheless looked expensive, her only jewelry, a thin gold chain around her neck. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white with tension. "Masha, this is Anya Kazakova," Nikolai said, his voice carefully neutral. "Anya, my wife. Masha." The younger woman stepped forward, her movements graceful despite her obvious discomfort. "I'm so sorry to meet you this way," she said, her Russian tinged with the faintest accent, Georgian perhaps, or Armenian. "I've heard so much about you." The absurd formality of the introduction struck Masha like a physical blow. This was happening in her own home, surrounded by the photographs of her marriage, beneath the painting they had bought on their honeymoon. "I've heard nothing about you," Masha replied coldly. Nikolai winced. "Please sit down, both of you. This will be difficult." Neither woman moved. They remained standing, forming an awkward triangle in the room where Masha had built her marriage. Her illusions of security. "I don't understand," Masha said. "You told me you were seriously ill. Your mother confirmed it. The doctors—" "There were no doctors," Nikolai interrupted gently. "No nurse, my mother, and she was helping me maintain the fiction." "Fiction?" The word felt strange on Masha's tongue. "You've been pretending to be ill for 4 months. But why would you—" "7 years," Anya said suddenly. Masha turned to her. "What?" "We've been together for 7 years," Anya clarified, her eyes never leaving Masha's face. "Not 4 months." The room seemed to tilt beneath Masha's feet. 7 years, half their marriage. She reached blindly for the back of the sofa to steady herself. "I met Anya in Tbilisi," Nikolai continued, his voice strained. "On that publishing conference you couldn't attend because of your father's surgery. She was working as a translator for the Georgian delegation." Masha remembered that trip, how Nikolai had returned seemingly rejuvenated, full of stories about the conference, the city, the people he'd met. She had been so caught up in her father's recovery that she hadn't noticed anything unusual. Had there been signs even then? Phone calls he took in another room? Unexplained absences? "We didn't mean for it to continue," Nikolai said. "But when Anya was offered a position in Moscow—" "You helped her move here," Masha finished flatly. The business trips that had increased over the years, the late nights at the office, all of it, lies. "I bought her this apartment," Nikolai admitted. "Officially it's a rental property, an investment. That's why you never questioned the extra expense." Masha thought of their financial discussions over the years, how she had trusted Nikolai completely with their investments while she focused on their day-to-day budget. Another area where her trust had been weaponized against her. But the illness, she pressed. Why invent something so elaborate? Why not simply leave? The last word caught in her throat. Nikolai and Anya exchanged a look. Intimate, practiced, the kind of wordless communication that only comes from years together. "Show her," Anya said quietly. Nikolai hesitated, then nodded. He walked to the hallway that led to their bedroom and opened the door Masha had always assumed was a linen closet. Inside was a narrow staircase Masha had never known existed, leading up to what must be a converted attic space. This building was originally a single-family home, Nikolai explained, his voice oddly distant. When it was divided into apartments in the Soviet era, some of the original features were preserved. This staircase connects to a small room above. That isn't officially part of any apartment. The building plans don't show it. I discovered it by accident when we first moved in. He began climbing the stairs, gesturing for Masha to follow. After a moment's hesitation, she did, aware of Anya trailing behind her. The staircase was steep and dark, opening into a small, warm room with sloped ceilings and a single round window that looked out over the city. The space was simply furnished: a small bed, a bookshelf, a colorful rug, and a crib. Inside, a child slept peacefully, a girl of perhaps 3 or 4, her dark curls spread across the pillow, one small hand clutching a stuffed rabbit. She had Nikolai's nose, his chin, but her coloring, the shape of her face, these came from the woman now standing protectively near the crib. "Her name is Sophia," Anya said softly. "She's 4. Masha stared at the sleeping child, unable to process what she was seeing. A child. Nikolai's child. A secret family literally hidden above their marriage, existing in parallel to the life she thought they shared. "She's been ill," Nikolai said, his voice breaking. "Not me. Sophia has a congenital heart condition. The surgery was last week. That's why we needed you out of the apartment during her recovery. We've been taking her back and forth to the hospital for treatment for months, but we couldn't risk moving her after the procedure. She needed to be here with both of us, but we couldn't." "You couldn't tell me," Masha finished for him. The pieces were falling into place now. The fictional illness mirroring the child's real condition, the elaborate deception created to give Nikolai the freedom to care for his daughter while maintaining his marriage. "I didn't know how," he admitted. "Each year it became harder to imagine telling you the truth. And then when Sophia was diagnosed, when we knew she would need surgery," he trailed off, looking helplessly at the sleeping child. Masha stepped closer to the crib, studying the little girl. Sophia's breathing was deep and regular, her small chest rising and falling beneath the colorful blanket. On the wall above the crib hung a mobile of delicate paper cranes, dozens of them in different colors, dancing in the slight breeze from the window. "I made those," Masha said distantly, recognizing her own handiwork. "Last year, when I was experimenting with origami. You said you wanted them for your office." Nikolai nodded, unable to speak. "So all those nights I thought you were suffering alone while I worked late. You were here, with them." The betrayal was so complex, so multifaceted that Masha couldn't begin to untangle it. "And your mother? She's known all along?" "She didn't approve," Nikolai said quickly, "but Sophia is her granddaughter. When the heart condition was diagnosed, she made her choice," Masha concluded, just as everyone around her had made choices that excluded her, that were predicated on her ignorance. Sophia stirred in her sleep, making a small sound of discomfort. Immediately, both Nikolai and Anya moved toward the crib, their bodies functioning in the synchronized dance of parents. Masha watched them, suddenly feeling like the intruder in this family tableau. "Why now?" she asked. "Why let me discover this today, after all these years of deception?" Anya answered, her voice low to avoid waking the child. "Sophia has been asking questions about where her papa goes when he's not with us, about why we have to be quiet during the day. She's starting to understand that our situation is unusual. We had decided to tell you after she recovered fully from the surgery," Nikolai added. "But today she had a small setback, nothing serious, but it frightened Yelena. She called you without consulting us first. By the time we realized what had happened, you were already on your way home." Masha looked between them. Her husband and his... what? Mistress seemed too tawdry a word for what was clearly a long-term partnership, a family bond. Whatever this was, it had endured for nearly as long as her marriage had. "Do you love her?" Masha asked simply. Nikolai's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," he said. "But Masha, I've loved you too. It hasn't all been a lie." An unexpected sound broke the heavy silence. Laughter. Masha's own laughter, bubbling up from some hysterical place inside her. "You've loved us both," she repeated. "How generous of you, Nikolai, how very convenient." Sophia stirred again, her eyes fluttering open at the sound. For a moment, she looked confused, her gaze traveling from her parents to this stranger in her room. Then she smiled, a drowsy, trusting smile that transformed her small face. "Hello?" she said in a voice still thick with sleep. "Are you Papa's friend?" The simple question cut through Masha like a blade. What was she now? Certainly not a wife in any meaningful sense. Not a stepmother. Sophia already had a mother who clearly adored her. Just a complication, an inconvenient reminder of a previous commitment. Before she could formulate an answer, Sophia's eyes had drifted closed again, sleep reclaiming her. The three adults remained frozen, as if the child's brief awakening had cast a spell that none of them knew how to break. Finally, Masha turned and walked back toward the narrow staircase. "I need air," she said, not looking at either of them. "I need to think." Neither Nikolai nor Anya tried to stop her as she descended the stairs, crossed the apartment that no longer felt like home, and walked out the door. The night air hit Masha's face like a physical shock as she stumbled out of the building. Moscow sprawled around her, indifferent to her unraveling life, cars streaming past, pedestrians hurrying home, the eternal city continuing in its rhythms while her personal universe imploded. Without conscious decision, her feet carried her to the small park, 2 blocks from the apartment. She collapsed onto a bench beneath a street lamp, her body suddenly leaden with exhaustion. Overhead, the September sky hung dark and clear, stars barely visible through the city's glow. Masha tilted her head back, focusing on her breathing, trying to slow the frantic pounding of her heart. 7 years, the number repeated itself in her mind, a relentless clock ticking backward through her marriage. 7 years of deception meant that Nikolai had been living his double life for most of their time together. How many moments that she had treasured as intimacy had been performances on his part? How many times had he left their bed to call Anya? How many family events had he attended reluctantly, his mind elsewhere with them? The magnitude of the deception was staggering. Not just Nikolai, but his mother. Perhaps friends they shared, all complicit in maintaining her ignorance. Had they laughed about it? Poor Masha, so dedicated to her work, so oblivious to what was happening in her own home. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos of their life together. Nikolai on their last vacation to the Black Sea, smiling into the camera as they sat at a beachside cafe. Had he called Anya that night while Masha slept? Had he wished he were there with his other family instead? A family. The image of Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her crib, returned to Masha with devastating clarity. A beautiful child with Nikolai's features, hidden away like a shameful secret. But the secrecy hadn't been to protect Masha, had it? It had been to protect Nikolai's comfort, his ability to maintain both relationships without having to make a choice. "Excuse me, are you all right?" Masha looked up to find an elderly man standing before her, concern etched on his weathered face. She realized she must look unhinged. A woman alone in a park at night staring at nothing, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she managed. "Thank you, I'm fine." The man hesitated, then nodded and continued on his way, casting one backward glance at her before disappearing around the corner. Fine. The word echoed hollowly. She was anything but fine. In the space of a few hours, everything she had believed about her life had been revealed as illusion. Her marriage, her husband's illness, the very architecture of their home, all of it constructed to accommodate an elaborate lie. But wasn't she complicit too in her own way? Hadn't she been so absorbed in her work, so certain of Nikolai's devotion, that she had failed to notice the signs that must have been there all along? The unexplained absences, the mysterious phone calls, the financial arrangements she had trusted without question, all breadcrumbs leading to a truth she had never followed. Masha's phone buzzed in her hand. Nikolai. She let it ring until voicemail claimed it. A moment later, a text appeared. "Please come back. We need to talk about what happens next." Next. As if there could be a next after this revelation. As if their marriage could continue in any form now that she knew. Yet even as anger surged through her, another emotion threaded its way through her consciousness. A strange, unwelcome sympathy. Not for Nikolai's betrayal, but for the child upstairs. Sophia, innocent in all this, recovering from heart surgery, unaware that her very existence had just shattered a woman's life. A little girl who might soon lose the stability of the only family she had known, and Anya. Masha tried to hate her, but found herself instead wondering what these years had been like for the other woman. Loving a man she could never fully claim, raising a child in secret, confined to a hidden room during the day, always second, always waiting. There was a cruelty in what Nikolai had done to both of them, keeping each in her place, neither with the full truth or the complete man. Her phone buzzed again. Not Nikolai this time, but Anton, her boss. The Tokyo partners accepted the revisions. Whatever family emergency called you away, I hope it's resolved. We need to talk tomorrow about your commitment to this position. Masha stared at the message, a hysterical laugh rising in her throat. Her commitment, as if her complete dedication to her work hadn't been one of the factors that had made Nikolai's deception possible. As if she hadn't sacrificed evenings, weekends, personal time, all to excel at a job that now seemed hollow and meaningless in the face of her personal collapse. She stood abruptly, her decision forming with sudden clarity. Returning to the apartment wasn't an option. Not tonight, perhaps not ever. But she couldn't sit in this park until dawn either. She needed somewhere to go, someone to talk to. Someone who had no connection to Nikolai, who wouldn't have been part of the conspiracy of silence. Her fingers found the contact for Yulia, her university roommate. They saw each other rarely now, their lives having diverged after graduation, but they had maintained a tenuous connection over the years. Yulia lived on the other side of the city with her wife and their son. They would take her in for the night, give her space to think without judgment. As she waited for the call to connect, Masha caught sight of her reflection in a darkened shop window. A woman she barely recognized, pale and hollow-eyed, the careful facade of competence and control completely shattered. Behind that reflection, she could almost see the ghost of who she had been just hours ago, hurrying home to a husband she thought she knew, to a marriage she believed was real. That woman was gone now. Whoever emerged from this betrayal would be someone else entirely. 3 days passed before Masha returned to the apartment. 3 days of sanctuary in Yulia's spare room, of alternating between numb silence and storms of grief. 3 days of ignoring Nikolai's increasingly desperate messages, of mechanically informing her office that she needed personal leave, of staring at the ceiling in the dark, rewriting the narrative of her marriage with this new, terrible knowledge. When she finally stood before the familiar door again, key in hand, she felt strangely calm. The initial shock had burned away, leaving something cooler and more resolved in its place. She had spent these days examining her options with the same methodical thoroughness she applied to her manuscripts, and she had reached certain conclusions. This time, the key turned smoothly in the lock. The apartment was silent as she entered, but evidence of occupation remained. A cup on the coffee table, a book left open on the sofa. Masha moved through the space that had once been her home, noting what had changed. Sophia's presence was no longer hidden. A small jacket hung by the door, a child's drawing magnetized to the refrigerator, a tiny pair of slippers beside the queue, larger adult ones. Nikolai emerged from the bedroom, stopping short when he saw her. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles shadowing his eyes, wearing the same clothes he'd had on when she left. Relief and apprehension warred in his expression. "You came back," he said quietly. "To talk," Masha clarified, "not to stay." "Where are they?" "At Anya's apartment, the real one. Sophia's been asking for her toys, her own bed." He hesitated. "She's been asking about you too. She wants to meet Papa's friend properly." The innocent designation made Masha flinch. "I'm not here to discuss the child, Mashenka." "Don't call me that," she interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended. "You've lost that, right?" He nodded, accepting this new boundary. "What do you want to discuss then?" "I need to understand, Nikolai, not the logistics. I've pieced those together. But why? Why maintain this fiction for so long? Why not divorce me when you fell in love with her, when she became pregnant? Why continue this farce of a marriage?" Nikolai sank onto the sofa, his posture that of a man far older than his 46 years. "I've asked myself the same questions 1,000 times these past days," he admitted. "The answer shames me." "Tell me anyway." He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed but direct. "I loved you both, differently but truly. With you I had history, partnership, intellectual connection. With Anya, it began as passion, something I thought would burn out. But then came Sophia. and it became a different kind of love. Family. Love? He spread his hands helplessly. I couldn't bear to lose either of you, so I convinced myself that I could maintain both relationships, that it was possible to keep these worlds separate. At what cost? Masha remained standing, unwilling to join him on the sofa they had chosen together years ago. To her? To me? To yourself? To that child upstairs? I didn't think about the cost, he admitted. I thought only about what I would lose by choosing. The simple selfishness of it struck Masha anew. Her husband, this man she had thought so caring, so principled, had orchestrated years of deception solely to avoid having to make a difficult choice. When Sophia was born, Nikolai continued, unprompted, I nearly told you everything. I stood in the hospital looking at her, and I couldn't believe what I had done, created this new life that would have to exist in shadows. But then months passed, and it seemed crueler to destroy what we had. And Anya, she accepted the arrangement. She never pressured me to leave you. How generous of her, Masha said bitterly. And what about when Sophia started asking questions? Were you planning to maintain this arrangement indefinitely? Was she to grow up hidden away, a secret daughter, never acknowledged? Nikolai winced. We had begun discussing changes. Anya was offered a position in St. Petersburg. We thought perhaps a gradual separation. I would commute at first, then eventually relocate there. I would tell you my company was opening a new office, that it was a promotion I couldn't refuse. More lies, Masha observed. Your solution to years of deception was to create new deceptions. I was a coward, he admitted. I still am. Even now, part of me wants to beg you to forgive me, to find some impossible arrangement where I don't have to give up either of you. The admission hung in the air between them. At least now, Masha thought, he was being honest, selfish but honest. Where is your mother in all this? She asked. Nikolai's expression shifted. She's been trying to call you. I know. I haven't answered. She didn't approve, Masha. When I told her about Anya, about the pregnancy, she threatened to tell you everything. But when Sophia was born, he trailed off. The pull of a grandchild was stronger than her disapproval, Masha finished for him. Yes. But she's torn apart by what this has done to you. She genuinely loves you, Masha. A bitter laugh escaped her. Love. That word has lost all meaning in this house. A key turned in the lock, and both of them turned toward the sound. Anya entered alone, stopping just inside the door when she saw Masha. She looked as exhausted as Nikolai, her honey-colored hair pulled back in a messy knot, her face bare of makeup. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I didn't know you would be here. I came to get Sophia's medicine. Her accent was more pronounced now, fatigue stripping away her careful Russian. Where is she? Nikolai asked, rising. With your mother, she's having a good day. The doctor says the incision is healing well. Anya remained by the door, clearly uncertain whether to enter further or retreat. Masha studied the woman who had shared her husband for 7 years. In the harsh daylight, Anya looked younger, more vulnerable than she had that night. Less a seductress, more a tired young mother worried about her child. Come in, Masha said finally. This concerns you too. Anya hesitated, then closed the door behind her and took a seat in the armchair opposite the sofa, as far from both of them as the small living room allowed. I have questions for you as well, Masha told her. How did you justify this to yourself? Living with a married man, raising your child in secrecy. Did you ever consider what this was doing to me? Anya's eyes dropped to her hands. At first I told myself it was temporary, that he would leave you or I would find the strength to end it. But then I was pregnant, and everything changed. She looked up, meeting Masha's gaze directly. I wish I could say I thought of you often, that I felt the weight of what we were doing to you. But the truth is, you became abstract to me. A name, a photograph, a schedule to work around. It was the only way I could live with myself. The honesty was startling. Masha had expected defensiveness, perhaps even hostility, but not this quiet acknowledgement of wrong. And now, Masha pressed, now that I'm not an abstraction, now that you've seen what this deception has done. Now I'm ashamed, Anya said simply. I look at you and I see a real person whose life we've shattered. I can't undo what we've done. I can only say that I'm sorry, though I know that means nothing. The three of them sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. The clock Masha had brought from her parents' home after her father died. How many hours of their shared life had that clock measured? How many moments of what she had thought was happiness? I've made some decisions, Masha said finally, addressing both of them. I won't be staying here. I've spoken with a lawyer. The divorce papers will be ready next week. Nikolai's face crumpled, but he didn't protest. What defense could he offer? The apartment is in both our names, Masha continued. I want you to buy out my share. Use it for your family, your real family. The words tasted bitter, but they needed to be said. Sophia shouldn't have to live in a hidden room anymore. Masha, Nikolai began, but she held up a hand, stopping him. I'm not finished. I don't want revenge, Nikolai. I don't want to punish you or Anya, or especially not that child. What I want is honesty, something you've denied me for years. So I'm going to ask you something, and I need the absolute truth. He nodded, his expression solemn. Were there others? Besides Anya? Other betrayals I don't know about. Nikolai shook his head firmly. No, never. Anya is the only one. Masha turned to Anya, and Sophia's heart condition. Is it real, or was that part of the fiction too? It's real, Anya confirmed, her hand moving instinctively to her own heart. A ventricular septal defect, a hole between the chambers of her heart. The surgery was to repair it. The prognosis is good, but she'll need checkups for years. Masha absorbed this, feeling a strange relief that at least this part hadn't been fabricated. The child's suffering, at least, was not a convenient plot device in Nikolai's elaborate deception. There's one more thing, Masha said. She reached into her bag and withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. This is for Sophia. When she's older, when she asks about me, about what happened, I want you to give her this and tell her the truth. Not some sanitized version where no one did anything wrong, but the real story. She deserves that much. She placed the package on the coffee table between them. Inside was a silver locket Masha's grandmother had given her, the one possession she had always treasured above all others. Why? Nikolai asked, staring at the package. Why would you give her anything after what we've done? Masha stood, gathering her coat, preparing to leave this apartment for what might be the last time. Because none of this is her fault. And because someday she needs to understand that actions have consequences, that the people we love can hurt us deeply, but that forgiveness is still possible. Not reconciliation. I won't pretend this marriage can be saved, but forgiveness eventually, for her sake, if nothing else. She moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at the two people who had rewritten her life without her knowledge or consent. Take care of her, she said quietly. Make sure that all of this was worth something. As she closed the door behind her, Masha heard Nikolai begin to weep, deep, broken sobs that followed her down the hallway. She did not turn back. The hotel room was impersonal and sterile. Anonymous beige walls, a generic landscape painting, starchy sheets that smelled faintly of industrial detergent. Masha sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by the hastily packed suitcases she had retrieved from the apartment, while Nikolai and Anya were out, presumably at a doctor's appointment with Sophia. She had taken only what was unquestionably hers: clothes, books, her laptop, the photo albums from before her marriage. Everything else, the furniture they had chosen together, the wedding gifts, the accumulated artifacts of 15 years, she had left behind. Night had fallen hours ago, but sleep remained elusive. Outside her window, Moscow continued its restless pulse. Traffic moving along the wide boulevard below, late-night revelers spilling from clubs and restaurants, lights glimmering in countless windows where other lives, other stories played out. Masha pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching a young couple cross the street below, hands intertwined, heads bent toward each other in intimate conversation. Had she and Nikolai ever looked like that? So completely absorbed in each other, so unaware of the world around them. She couldn't remember. The memories of their early days together now felt suspect, contaminated by the knowledge that even then, he had been capable of such profound deception. Her phone rang, Svetlana from the office. Masha let it go to voicemail. She had called Anton earlier to extend her leave, citing a family crisis. He had been surprisingly accommodating, perhaps softened by the success of the Tokyo contract. "Take the week," he had said. "Svetlana is handling things well enough. But Masha, we'll need to discuss your long-term plans when you return. This kind of sudden absence, it raises questions about reliability. Once such an implied threat to her professional standing would have sent Masha into a panic of justifications and promises. Now it barely registered. What did it matter if she lost the job she had prioritized over everything else? What had that dedication gotten her in the end? But a husband who used her work ethic as cover for his betrayal. The room felt suddenly suffocating. Masha grabbed her coat and keycard and headed for the lobby. The night clerk looked up briefly, as she passed, then returned to his book. Outside, the air was crisp with early autumn, carrying the first hint of the winter to come. Masha walked aimlessly, letting her feet carry her where they would, no destination in mind. She found herself near the river, the city's lights reflecting in the dark water, creating constellations that shifted and reformed with each ripple. A path ran along the embankment, dotted with benches. Masha chose one and sat, drawing her coat more tightly around her against the night air. Time blurred as she sat there watching the water. Occasionally, someone would pass by, a jogger, a couple, once a woman walking a small dog that yapped exuberantly. At the water, Masha registered these fleeting presences dimly, her mind elsewhere. She thought of Sophia, the sleeping child she had glimpsed so briefly. What would her life be like now? Would Nikolai and Anya marry once the divorce was final? Would they create a new, legitimate family unit, their years of secrecy becoming simply an unfortunate prelude to happily ever after? The thought should have hurt more than it did, but Masha found herself oddly detached from the idea. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Expecting Nikolai again, she was surprised to see Yelena's name on the screen. "I know you don't want to speak to me, and I understand. But I need you to know that I fought against this deception from the beginning. I failed you, Mashenka. I chose my granddaughter over the truth, and that choice cost you dearly. I will regret it until my last day." Masha stared at the message, memories surfacing of Yelena teaching her to make proper borscht in the early days of her marriage, of sitting with her in the hospital when the older woman had broken her hip too. Winters ago of the Mother's Day cards Masha had faithfully sent each year, knowing how much Yelena missed having a daughter. All real connections, genuine affection, yet all existing alongside this monstrous lie. As she struggled with whether to respond, another text arrived. "Sophia asked about you again today. She says you have kind eyes. Children see what we adults often miss." The simple message broke something in Masha that all the previous revelations had not. She bent forward on the bench, arms wrapped around herself, and finally allowed the tears to come. Not the shocked, angry tears of the first night, but deeper, more elemental grief for everything that had been lost. For the years given to a man who had not deserved them. For the child she might have had with Nikolai if things had been different. For the trust that had been so casually, so thoroughly violated. She wept until her throat ached and her eyes burned, until the tears had washed away something dark and constricting that had been wound around her heart since the moment she couldn't open her door. When the storm finally passed, Masha sat up, wiping her face with her sleeve, taking deep, shuddering breaths. The sky had begun to lighten almost imperceptibly in the east, not dawn yet, but its first intimation. She had sat on this bench through the darkest hours of the night and had emerged somehow on the other side. Her phone showed 4:17 a.m. On impulse, she typed a reply to Yelena. "I'm not ready to forgive, but I will be someday. Tell Sophia her eyes are kind too." She rose from the bench, her body stiff from hours of immobility in the cold. As she began walking back toward the hotel, a text notification sounded. "Not Yelena. This time, but Yulia, thinking of you. Remember what we used to say in university. No disaster is final until you decide it is. Call me when you wake up." "I have an idea." Masha paused beneath a street lamp to read the message again. Yulia had been thinking about her situation, it seemed. The thought warmed her, the reminder that there were people in her life who had nothing to do with Nikolai, connections that existed independently of her marriage. As she resumed walking, Masha realized with sudden clarity that this was the first time since discovering Nikolai's betrayal that she had thought about her future rather than her past. What shape that future might take remained unclear, but the simple acknowledgement that it existed, that life would continue beyond this crisis, felt like the first step on a long journey back to herself. The hotel came into view, its illuminated sign a beacon in the pre-dawn darkness. Masha stopped at a 24-hour cafe across the street, ordering coffee and a pastry from a sleepy-eyed server. She sat at a small table by the window, watching as the city slowly awakened around her. Delivery trucks making early rounds, street cleaners beginning their daily routines, a few dedicated runners passing by in their reflective gear. By the time she finished her coffee, true dawn had broken over Moscow, pale golden light spilling across the buildings, transforming the grey concrete into something almost beautiful. Masha left the cafe and crossed to the hotel, but instead of returning to her room, she asked the front desk for a city map. "Planning some sightseeing?" the clerk asked, stifling a yawn as he handed her the map. "Planning my next move," Masha replied. And for the first time in days, she felt something like hope unfurling in her chest, tentative and fragile, but undeniably present. 6 months later, Masha stood before a different door. This one freshly painted a deep blue with a bright brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head. The apartment behind it was smaller than the one she had shared with Nikolai, tucked into an older building in a quieter neighborhood across the city. But it was hers alone, purchased with her share of their property settlement and furnished, according to her tastes alone. She turned the key, feeling the now familiar satisfaction of the lock yielding to her command, and stepped inside. The entryway was crowded with packing boxes, most still sealed, a few spilling their contents across the hardwood floors. The chaos of moving surrounded her, but it was a chaos of her own making, a disorder that signified not an ending but a beginning. Her phone rang as she set down her shopping bags. "Yulia, are we still on for dinner?" her friend asked without preamble. "Katya's made her famous pelmeni, and Mikhail has been asking all day when Aunt Masha is coming." "I wouldn't miss it," Masha assured her, "but I'll be a bit late. I have one more stop to make first." After ending the call, Masha moved through her new apartment, taking inventory of what had been accomplished and what remained to be done. The kitchen was functional if sparse. The bedroom had a mattress, but no frame yet. The small second bedroom, the one she had insisted on despite the additional cost, remained completely empty except for a desk by the window, a laptop open on its surface. Masha sat at the desk, opening the document she had been working on late into the previous night. The manuscript's title page read, "After the Door Closes, Rebuilding Trust After Betrayal" by Masha Petrova. 50 pages so far, with a publisher already interested based on the proposal Yulia had helped her craft. Not a memoir exactly, though. Elements of her experience threaded through the text, but a broader exploration of how people reconstruct their lives after fundamental deceptions. The idea had come from Yulia that morning, after the endless night by the river. "You're an editor, Masha. You know how to shape narratives. But what if you wrote your own for once, not just for yourself, but for others who've experienced something similar?" The suggestion had seemed impossible at first, too raw, too personal. But as the weeks passed and the divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising civility, Masha had found herself making notes, recording observations, gradually building the framework for a book that might help others navigate what she had endured. She closed the laptop and checked her watch. If she left now, she would have just enough time. 30 minutes later, Masha stood before another door, this one painfully familiar, despite the months that had passed since she had last seen it. The door to what had once been her home, now legally Nikolai and Anya's residence. She had called ahead, arranging this brief visit during a time when she knew Nikolai would be at work. Anya opened the door, her expression cautious but not unwelcoming. "Thank you for agreeing to this," Masha said simply. Anya nodded, stepping back to allow her entry. The apartment had changed in subtle ways. New curtains, different artwork on the walls, toys now openly displayed in the living room. Evidence of a family no longer living in shadows. "She's very excited," Anya said, leading Masha through the familiar space that now felt like visiting a dream. She's been talking about it all day. They reached the base of the narrow staircase that Masha had climbed only once before, on the night her marriage had ended. This time she followed Anya up the steps with a different kind of trepidation. Sophia sat on a colorful rug in the center of the small room, surrounded by stuffed animals arranged in what appeared to be a tea party. She looked up as they entered, her dark curls framing a face that had grown more defined since Masha had glimpsed her sleeping form 6 months earlier. The resemblance to Nikolai was still strong, but Masha could see Anya in her too, in the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. "Sophia," Anya said gently, "this is Masha, the friend I told you about." The little girl studied Masha solemnly, then broke into a sudden, dazzling smile. "Hello," she said, gesturing to the stuffed animals. "We're having a celebration because I don't have to take the yucky medicine anymore. Would you like some tea?" Masha knelt carefully on the rug, accepting the empty plastic cup Sophia offered. "I would love some. What are we celebrating exactly?" Dr. Ivanov says. "My heart is all fixed now," Sophia explained, with the matter-of-fact tone children use for momentous news. "He says I'm very brave. You must be," Masha agreed. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Anya retreat discreetly down the stairs, leaving them alone. For the next half hour, Masha entered Sophia's world completely, pouring imaginary tea, being introduced to each stuffed animal by name and personality, listening to the little girl's accounts of her recovery and her recent start at kindergarten. There was an ease to their interaction that surprised Masha, an absence of the awkwardness she had feared. When Sophia tired of the tea party and asked to show Masha her drawings, Masha noticed something hanging around the child's neck, a silver locket, the one she had left for Sophia months ago. "That's a beautiful necklace," she said carefully. Sophia's small hand went to it immediately, her expression turning serious. "Mama says it's very special, and I must be careful with it. It has a picture inside. May I see?" Masha asked. Sophia nodded, carefully opening the locket to reveal the photograph Masha had placed inside before gifting it. Not a picture of herself, as might have been expected, but a small reproduction of Klimt's The Tree of Life, with its swirling branches and golden symbols of continuity and regeneration. "It's a magic tree," Sophia explained earnestly. "Mama says it means that life keeps growing, even when parts of it get broken." Anya's voice came from the doorway. "I hope you don't mind. I tried to explain it in a way she could understand." Masha looked up, her vision blurring slightly. "No, I don't mind, it's perfect." Later, after Sophia had been persuaded to continue her drawing while the adults talked, Masha and Anya sat at the kitchen table downstairs, an awkward echo of what normal friendship might look like. "How is she really?" Masha asked. "Her health? Better every day," Anya confirmed. "The doctors are very optimistic, and she's thriving at kindergarten, making friends, learning so quickly." She hesitated, then added, "Nikolai wanted to be here today, to see you." Masha shook her head. "I'm not ready for that. Maybe someday, but not yet." She placed a small wrapped package on the table. "This is for her birthday next month. Nothing expensive, just a book I thought she might enjoy." Anya accepted it with a nod. "She'll love it. She's fascinated by stories right now." Another pause. "He talks about you, you know, about how much he regrets what he did." "I don't need to hear that," Masha said firmly. "What's done is done. I didn't come here for apologies or explanations." "Why did you come?" Anya asked, her direct gaze reminiscent of their first confrontation 6 months earlier. Masha considered the question. "To see her," she said finally, "to make sure she's okay, and maybe to remind myself that something good came from all of this pain. She's a wonderful child, Anya. You've done well with her, despite the circumstances." A complex emotion passed over Anya's face, part pride, part lingering guilt. "We're moving," she said suddenly, "to St. Petersburg, as was planned before. Nikolai has found a position there, and I've been offered a permanent translation role with the Cultural Ministry. Sophia will start first grade there in the fall." The news settled over Masha with surprising lightness. She had anticipated pain at this final severing of connections, but instead felt only a gentle sadness tinged with something like relief. "That's good," she said sincerely. "A fresh start for all of you." As she prepared to leave, Sophia came running down the stairs, clutching a drawing. "This is for you," she said, presenting it to Masha with solemn ceremony. The picture showed 3 stick figures standing before what appeared to be a house. 2 tall figures, one with long hair, one with short, and between them, a smaller figure with curly hair. All 3 were smiling, surrounded by swirling lines that might have been wind or might have been magic. "Is this your family?" Masha asked gently. Sophia nodded. "And our new house in St. Petersburg. Mama says you might visit us there someday." Masha glanced at Anya, who shrugged slightly, an apology in her eyes for the presumption. But looking at Sophia's hopeful face, Masha found she couldn't dismiss the possibility outright. "Perhaps someday," she said carefully, "when you're a bit older." It was neither a promise nor a refusal, just an acknowledgement that the future remained unwritten, that doors once closed might someday open again, if only partially. Outside the apartment building, Masha paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the windows she had once cleaned every Sunday morning, the balcony where she and Nikolai had shared countless summer evenings. Soon another family would live there, unaware of the history contained within those walls, the love and deception and grief that had played out in those rooms. Her phone buzzed with a message from Yulia. "Mikhail is asking every 5 minutes when you're arriving. Should I tell him his favorite aunt got lost?" Masha smiled, typing a quick reply. "On my way. Tell him I'm bringing strawberry ice cream for dessert." As she walked toward the metro station, Masha noticed the black car still parked in front of the building. Nikolai's car now, she supposed. A woman emerged from the building entrance, hesitating, when she saw Masha, Yelena. Their eyes met across the distance, and after a moment's pause, Masha raised her hand in a small gesture of acknowledgement. Yelena returned it, her expression a complex mixture of sorrow and relief. No words were exchanged, no dramatic reconciliation. Just a simple recognition that they had both survived something painful, that life continued beyond betrayal. At the metro entrance, Masha paused for one last look at the building that had been her home. From the 5th floor, a small face appeared at the window, Sophia watching her go. The child waved enthusiastically, and Masha found herself waving back. Then she descended the steps into the station, moving with purpose toward the train that would take her across the city to Yulia's home, where a different kind of family waited. One formed by choice rather than blood or legal bonds, but no less real for that difference. As the train pulled away from the station, carrying her toward that new life, Masha felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with forgetting what had happened and everything to do with accepting it. The door that had refused to open 6 months ago had led her here. To loss, yes, but also to discovery. To the knowledge that she was stronger than she had known, more resilient than she had believed. To the understanding that some doors close so that others can open. And in that moment, moving forward into an uncertain but no longer terrifying future, Masha finally felt ready to step through.